The Valorian Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for 4 million years, and in all that time, they had never met a species quite like humanity. High Ambassador Kethvora stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Grace, watching the small blue planet rotate slowly beneath him. It was beautiful in a fragile way, covered in swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans that reminded him of the gemstones his people treasured. His crystalline body caught the light from the nearby yellow star and scattered it into 1,000 rainbow fragments across the deck walls. He had been chosen for this mission because he was the Empire's finest diplomat, a being who had brought 300 species into the Imperial fold without ever firing a single weapon. Ambassador said his second-in-command, a younger Valorian named Thissa. The humans have detected our fleet, and they are broadcasting a message on all frequencies. Kethvora turned his attention to the communication screen, where a human face appeared. It belonged to a female of their species with dark skin and silver hair, and her eyes held a calm intelligence that impressed him immediately. "Unknown vessels," the human said. "This is Secretary General Amara Okonkwo of the United Earth Council. We welcome you in peace and invite you to open diplomatic communications." The ambassador felt a wave of satisfaction wash through his ancient mind. These creatures were civilized, which would make everything so much easier. "Open a channel," he commanded. And when the connection was established, he spoke in the human language he had learned during the journey. "Greetings, Secretary General. I am High Ambassador Kethvora of the Valorian Galactic Empire, and I come bearing gifts beyond your imagination." The human woman nodded respectfully, but showed no fear, which was unusual. Most species trembled when they saw the massive warships that accompanied the diplomatic fleet. "We would be honored to receive you." "Ambassador," she replied, "please send a shuttle to the coordinates we are transmitting, and we will meet you there." 3 hours later, Kethvora walked through the halls of the United Nations building in a city called New York. Humans of all shapes and sizes stopped to stare at him as he passed, their mouths hanging open in wonder and curiosity rather than terror. He found this refreshing. So many species had cowered before him, begging for mercy before he had even spoken a word. But these humans simply watched him with bright eyes full of questions. The council chamber was a large circular room, filled with representatives from every nation on the planet. Kethvora took his place at the central podium and looked out at the sea of human faces before him. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying through the silent room. "For 4 million years, the Valorian Empire has guided the development of countless civilizations across this galaxy. We have watched you from afar, studied your progress, and we have decided that you are ready to join us." He raised his crystalline arms in a gesture of welcome. "We offer you membership in the greatest civilization the universe has ever known. You will have access to technology that will seem like magic to your scientists. You will receive medical advances that can cure every disease and extend your lives by hundreds of years. You will be protected by the mightiest fleet ever assembled, and no enemy will ever threaten your world again." The humans listened in silence. Their faces on Kethvora continued with growing enthusiasm. "We will give you the secrets of faster-than-light travel, and your people will spread across the stars in ships that can cross the galaxy in mere days. We will teach you to harness the power of suns, and energy will become as free as the air you breathe. We will share our knowledge of the cosmos, and the mysteries of the universe will be laid bare before you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "All we ask in return is that you accept our guidance and become part of our great family. You will keep your culture, your traditions, and your identity, but you will also gain the wisdom of 1,000 civilizations that came before you." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. And then the Secretary General rose from her seat. "Ambassador Kethvora," she said, her voice steady and calm, "on behalf of the people of Earth, I thank you for this extraordinary offer. The gifts you describe would transform our civilization in ways we can barely imagine. Kethvara felt the familiar warmth of success spreading through him. This was always his favorite moment, when a new species realized the magnitude of what they were being given. But then the human woman said something that shattered his expectations completely. However, after careful consideration, we must respectfully decline. The words hung in the air like frozen crystals. And for the first time in his ancient life, Kethvara felt confusion. I do not understand, he said slowly, his crystalline form flickering with colors he could not control. You are refusing our gifts. You are saying no to immortality, to unlimited power, to the protection of the greatest empire in existence? Secretary General Okonkwo nodded, her expression kind but firm. We are grateful for your offer, Ambassador. Truly we are. But humanity has always made its own way in the universe, and we are not ready to change that now. Kethvara looked around the chamber, searching for signs of dissent, expecting some of the humans to protest their leader's decision. Surely not all of them could be so foolish, but every face he saw reflected the same quiet determination he saw in there. Secretary General, perhaps you do not fully understand what you are rejecting, he said, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. Without our protection, your planet is vulnerable to threats you cannot even imagine. There are species in this galaxy that would consume your world without a second thought. The human woman smiled, and it was not a smile of ignorance or naivety. It was the smile of someone who had weighed the risks and made her choice with full knowledge of the consequences. We understand, Ambassador, but we would rather face those threats as free people than hide behind walls we did not build ourselves. Kethvara stood in stunned silence as the council members began to file out of the chamber. Some of them nodded to him politely as they passed, as if they had just declined an invitation to dinner rather than rejecting the greatest offer any civilization had ever received. Tessa met him outside the building, her crystalline face pale with shock. Ambassador, this is unprecedented, she said. In 4 million years, no species has ever refused the Empire's offer. What do we do now? Kethvara looked up at the blue sky of this strange world, watching the white clouds drift lazily overhead. We report to the Emperor, he said finally, and we hope that he takes this news better than I fear he will. As their shuttle lifted off and carried them back to the fleet, Kethvara found himself looking down at the planet below with new eyes. These humans were either the wisest species he had ever encountered or the most foolish, and he genuinely could not decide which. One thing was certain, though: the galaxy would never be the same again. The news of humanity's refusal spread across the galaxy like wildfire, traveling through communication networks and trade routes, until every corner of known space had heard the impossible story on 1,000 different worlds. Beings of every shape and size gathered around screens and holographic displays, watching the recording of that fateful council meeting with disbelief in their eyes. They said no, whispered the Kethmari, a species of gentle giants who had accepted the Empire's offer 300,000 years ago. How could they say no? Madness, declared the Voss Collective, a hive mind that had joined the Empire before the first human had ever walked upright. The humans must be suffering from some form of mass insanity. Even the singing minds of Andromeda, ancient beings of pure energy who rarely concerned themselves with the affairs of physical creatures, took notice of this strange new species that had dared to reject paradise. But the Valorian Emperor was not content to simply accept humanity's decision. He had ruled the galaxy for longer than most stars had burned, and he was not about to let a single primitive species embarrass his great empire. Send the ambassador back, he commanded from his throne of living light. Offer them more. Offer them everything they could possibly desire. There must be something these humans want, and so Kethvara returned to Earth. This time, with an even grander fleet and even more spectacular gifts, he met with Secretary General Okonkwo in a garden in the human city of Geneva, where flowers of 100 colors bloomed beneath a warm spring sun. "We have reconsidered your situation," Kethvara said, trying to sound confident, even though his previous failure haunted him. "And we believe we may have been too modest in our initial offer." The Secretary General raised one eyebrow in amusement. "Too modest, Ambassador?" "Indeed. We would like to offer humanity unlimited energy through zero-point reactors. These devices draw power directly from the fabric of space itself and can provide more energy in a single day than your sun produces in a year." He waved his crystalline hand, and a holographic image appeared between them, showing a small glowing sphere that pulsed with unimaginable power. "With this technology, you would never need to burn fossil fuels again. Your factories would run forever. Your cities would shine brighter than the stars. And your people would never again know cold or hunger." Amara Okonkwo looked at the image for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "It is a remarkable device," she admitted, "and I can see how it would solve many of our problems." Kethvara felt hope rising in his crystal heart. "But we must decline." The hope shattered like glass. "Perhaps," the ambassador said quickly, "you would be more interested in our terraforming technology. We can transform dead worlds into living gardens, filling them with air and water and life. Your planet Mars could become a second Earth within a decade, and your people would have room to grow for thousands of generations." Again he showed her images, red Mars turning green and blue, its barren surface transforming into forests and oceans and cities gleaming in the sunlight. "Think of it," he urged. "Endless room for your growing population, new frontiers for your explorers, fresh starts for anyone who dreams of building something new." The Secretary General smiled sadly. "We are already working on terraforming Mars ourselves, Ambassador. It will take us longer than a decade, perhaps centuries, but we will do it with our own hands and our own minds." Kethvara felt frustration building inside him, something he had not experienced in millennia. "Then let me offer you the greatest gift of all," he said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "We can give you immortality. Our genetic reconstruction technology can repair the damage of aging at the cellular level. Humans who receive this treatment will never grow old, never sicken, never die except by violence or accident." He leaned forward, his crystalline eyes burning with intensity. "Your scientists, your artists, your greatest minds could work for thousands of years instead of mere decades. Imagine what your species could accomplish with unlimited time. Imagine never having to say goodbye to the people you love." For the first time, Kethvara saw something flicker in the Secretary General's eyes. Was it temptation or perhaps grief for someone she had lost? But when she spoke, her voice was as steady as ever. "Ambassador, do you know what makes a flower beautiful?" The question caught him off guard. "Its colors, I suppose. Its shape, its scent, perhaps," she said, reaching down to touch a delicate purple blossom. "But I think its beauty also comes from its fragility. This flower will bloom for only a few days, and then it will fade and die. And that is part of what makes it precious." She looked up at him with those calm, ancient eyes that seemed so strange in such a young face. "Humans are like flowers, Ambassador. We bloom brightly for a short time, and then we are gone. But that is not a weakness. It is what gives our lives meaning. Every moment matters to us because we know our moments are limited." Kethvara struggled to understand her words. "You are choosing death over life," he said. "That is irrational. We are choosing to remain human," she replied. "And for us, that is the most rational choice of all." The ambassador returned to his fleet that night with nothing to show for his efforts. And as the days passed, he tried again and again with different offers and different approaches. he offered them seats on the High Council, a voice in the governance of 1,000,000 worlds. They declined. He offered them exclusive trading rights across the entire empire, wealth beyond measure. They declined. He offered them military alliances and defensive pacts, promising that no force in the galaxy would ever threaten Earth again. They declined. Each refusal was delivered with the same polite respect, the same gentle smiles, and the same iron determination that Kethvora had come to both admire and despise back on the Valorian homeworld. The Emperor grew increasingly impatient. Messengers brought him reports of the ambassador's failures, and with each one, his ancient temper burned hotter. What do these creatures want? He demanded of his advisors. Every species wants something. The Kethmari wanted safety, so he gave them safety. The Voss wanted knowledge, so he gave them knowledge. What is it that humans desire? His advisors exchanged nervous glances, none of them willing to speak finally. An old counselor named Vethrin stepped forward. He was nearly as ancient as the Emperor himself, and had earned the right to speak uncomfortable truths, perhaps. Eternal One, they desire nothing that we can give them. The Emperor's eyes blazed with fury. Impossible. We have everything. We control the very fabric of reality itself. There is nothing in this universe that is not ours to offer. Vethrin bowed his crystalline head, and yet they continued to refuse. Perhaps the problem is not what we are offering, but what we are asking in return. The chamber fell silent as the Emperor considered these words. For a long moment, no one dared to breathe. Then the Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the assembled courtiers. "I have been patient," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. "I have been generous. I have offered these humans gifts that any other species would kill for. But my patience has limits." He turned to face the great window that looked out upon the endless stars of his empire. If they will not accept our gifts willingly, then perhaps they need to understand what happens to those who reject the Valorian Empire. A cold chill passed through the chamber as everyone understood what the Emperor was suggesting. "Prepare the conquest fleet," he commanded. "It is time to teach humanity a lesson they will never forget." And across the galaxy, 1,000 warships began their long journey toward the small blue planet that had dared to say no. Ambassador Kethvora received the news of the conquest fleet while standing on the shores of an ocean on Earth, watching the waves crash against the rocks as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange, and Pink, a human child, had wandered up to him earlier, unafraid of his strange crystalline appearance, and had asked him if he was an angel. He had not known how to answer, and the child's mother had quickly pulled her away with apologetic smiles now. As he read the Emperor's orders on his communication device, he felt something he had never felt before. Genuine fernet for himself. Valorians did not fear death, but fear for these strange, stubborn, wonderful creatures who had so thoroughly confused him. He returned to his shuttle and flew back to the Eternal Grace, where Thesa was waiting with questions in her eyes. "Ambassador, is it true? Is the Emperor really sending the conquest fleet?" Kethvora nodded slowly, his crystalline body dim with sorrow. "It is true. In 3 of their years, 1,000 warships will arrive in this system, and they will give humanity one final chance to accept our offer. If they refuse again, the fleet will use force." Thesa's form flickered with distress. "But that is not how we do things. The Valorian Empire does not conquer. We welcome. We embrace. We nurture. We did once," Kethvora replied, his voice heavy with ancient memory. "Millions of years ago, before I was born, the Empire conquered many worlds. We took what we wanted by force, and millions died. But we learned that fear is a poor foundation for an empire, and so we changed our ways." He looked out the viewport at the blue planet below, or so I believed. "Perhaps we have simply forgotten what we truly are." The next morning, Kethvora requested a final meeting with Secretary General Okonkwo. She agreed, and they met in a quiet park in the city of Tokyo, where cherry blossoms floated through the air like pink snow. "You have heard about the conquest fleet," he said. It was not a question. "We have," she replied calmly. "Our astronomers detected the energy signatures of your ships preparing for their journey. You have 3 years to prepare," Kethvora said. 3 years to build defenses, to train soldiers, to find some way to protect your world. But I must tell you honestly, Secretary General, there is no defense that can stand against the conquest fleet. They have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Amara Okonkwo sat down on a park bench and patted the space beside her. After a moment of hesitation, Kethvora joined her. "Ambassador, may I ask you a personal question?" He nodded. "In your millions of years of life, have you ever fought in a war?" Kethvora considered the question carefully. "No," he admitted. "I have studied the histories, of course. I know of the ancient wars that shaped our empire. But I myself have never raised a weapon against another being. And the crews of your warships, have they fought?" "They train constantly," he said. "Their simulations are perfect recreations of historical battles. They are as prepared as any soldiers could be." The Secretary General smiled, and there was something almost sad in her expression. "Do you know why humans have always refused your offers, Ambassador?" He shook his crystalline head. "I have tried to understand, but you are unlike any species I have ever encountered. You reject gifts that would make your lives immeasurably better. It defies all logic." Amara picked up a fallen cherry blossom and studied it thoughtfully. "It is because we have learned something in our short history that your people have forgotten in your long one. The things that make life worth living cannot be given. They must be earned." She let the blossom fall from her fingers. When a human climbs a mountain, she does not wish to be carried to the top. The joy is in the climbing. When a human creates a work of art, he does not wish for someone else to paint it for him. The joy is in the creating. Kethvora listened, his ancient mind struggling to grasp concepts that seemed so simple, yet so profound. "Your empire offers us everything," she continued. "But in doing so, you would take away everything that matters. We would have immortality, but we would lose the urgency that drives us to make each day count. We would have unlimited power, but we would lose the satisfaction of building something with our own hands. We would have safety, but we would lose the courage that comes from facing danger and overcoming it." The ambassador felt understanding beginning to dawn. "You fear that our gifts would change you," he said slowly. "That you would become something different. Something less than what you are. We would become dependent," she replied. "And a dependent species is a dying species, even if it takes 1,000,000 years to finish dying." Kethvora sat in silence for a long moment. Processing her words, "I must report to the Emperor," he finally said. "I must try to make him understand." "You will fail," she said, not unkindly. "Power that has never been challenged cannot imagine being wrong. But I thank you for trying." 3 weeks later, Kethvora stood before the throne of light, facing the Emperor directly for the first time in centuries. "Eternal One," he began, "I have spent many months among the humans, studying their ways and learning their thoughts. I believe I understand now why they have refused our offers." The Emperor's eyes burned with impatience. "Explain." "They do not want anything from us. And that is precisely what makes them dangerous." A murmur passed through the assembled courtiers. This was not what anyone had expected to hear. "Dangerous?" The Emperor repeated, his voice cold with warning. "Yes, Eternal One. Our empire is built on dependency. We offer species gifts beyond their imagination, and in accepting those gifts, they become reliant upon us. Within a few generations, they forget how to survive without our technology, our medicine, our protection. They become loyal because they have no choice." Kethvora felt the weight of the Emperor's gaze upon him, but pressed on. But the humans have looked at our gifts and seen them for what they truly are. Chains disguised as treasures. They would rather struggle and fail than succeed with borrowed strength. They would rather die free than live forever in our shadow. The Emperor rose from his throne, and the chamber trembled with his anger. You admire them, he accused. You have spent too long among these primitives, and they have infected you with their madness. I do admire them, Kethvara admitted, and I fear them, because when the conquest fleet arrives, they will not surrender. They will fight, and they will lose, but they will make us pay dearly for every victory. He looked up at the Emperor, his crystalline eyes burning with conviction. And when it is over, when we have destroyed their cities and killed their soldiers and forced them to kneel, we will have proven exactly why they were right to refuse us. We will have shown the entire galaxy that the Valorian Empire is not a family of willing participants, but a prison of conquered slaves. The chamber erupted in outrage. Advisors shouted, guards stepped forward, and the Emperor's face twisted with fury. But Kethvara continued, his voice rising above the chaos. Every species that has ever joined us will see what we truly are. They will watch us destroy a world that wanted nothing more than to be left alone. And they will wonder if they made the right choice. They will wonder if their ancestors should have fought instead of kneeled. The Emperor's hand shot out. An invisible force seized Kethvara, lifting him into the air. You forget your place. Ambassador, I remember it perfectly, Eternal One. I am your voice to the galaxy, and I am telling you that this path leads to ruin. The Emperor hurled him to the ground, where he lay in a broken heap of shattered crystal. Remove him, the Emperor commanded. Strip him of his rank and titles. Let him spend eternity in contemplation of his failures. As the guards dragged Kethvara away, he looked back at the Emperor one last time. You cannot silence the truth forever, Eternal One. The humans have already won, whether you destroy them or not, because they have shown the galaxy that it is possible to say no. The doors slammed shut behind him, and the conquest fleet continued its journey toward Earth, carrying 1,000 warships crewed by soldiers who had never known battle. Commanded by admirals who had never tasted defeat, they had no idea what was waiting for them. 3 years passed on Earth, and humanity did not spend them in fear or despair. Instead, they worked with a determination that would have amazed Ambassador Kethvara if he could have seen it. Every nation on the planet set aside its differences and united under a single purpose. Survival scientists who had once competed against each other now shared their discoveries freely, racing to understand the fragments of Valorian technology that had been left behind during the diplomatic visits. What had seemed like magic 3 years ago was slowly becoming comprehensible, and what was comprehensible could be replicated in shipyards across the world. New vessels took shape, not elegant like Valorian ships, but functional and deadly, built with human ingenuity and human stubbornness. They were ugly, these first warships of humanity, welded together from steel and determination, bristling with weapons that no other species had ever imagined. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, the flagship of Earth's new fleet, watching her crew run through combat drills for the 100th time. She was a small woman with gray-streaked black hair and eyes that had seen, too, much death in the regional conflicts of her youth. Her first officer, Captain Marcus Stone, approached with a tablet in his hands. Admiral, the latest sensor reports. The conquest fleet is 3 days out. Chen Wei took the tablet and studied the data. 1,000 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, carrying weapons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect asteroids. By any logical measure, Earth's fleet of 63 vessels had no chance. How are the crews holding up? She asked, nervous. Admiral, Most of them have never seen real combat. Neither have I, for that matter. She handed the tablet back to him and smiled grimly. Neither had the soldiers at Thermopylae, or the defenders of Stalingrad, or the rebels at the Alamo. Humans have a long history of fighting battles we cannot win, Captain, and sometimes we win them anyway. The days passed. And then the conquest fleet arrived. They emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Mars. Their formation perfect, their weapons charged, their crews confident in their inevitable victory. Grand Admiral Vethkoren, who commanded the fleet from the largest ship ever built, surveyed the human defenses with amusement. Is this their response? He asked his officers. 6-3 primitive vessels against 1,000 of our finest. This will not be a battle. It will be an execution. He opened a communication channel to the human flagship. Attention, human fleet. I am Grand Admiral Vethkoren of the Valorian Conquest Fleet. You have been given one final opportunity to accept the Emperor's generous offer. Surrender now, accept membership in the Empire, and no harm will come to your world. Continue this foolish resistance, and we will be forced to demonstrate our power in ways you will not survive on the bridge of the Defiance. Admiral Chun Wei listened to the message with a calm expression. Around her, her crew looked to her with fear and hope and trust in their eyes. She activated her own communication channel, broadcasting not just to the Conquest Fleet, but to every ship in the human fleet, every screen on Earth, and every listening station across the galaxy. Grand Admiral Vethkoren. This is Admiral Chun Wei of the United Earth Fleet. I have received your offer, and I have a response. She stood up from her command chair and faced the view screen directly. You offer us immortality. But we have always known we are mortal, and we have learned to make every moment count. You offer us peace, but we have fought 10,000 wars against each other, and we know that peace earned is stronger than peace given. You offer us everything, but we have built ourselves from nothing, and we will not trade our identity for your comfort. Her voice hardened, and her eyes burned with a fire that made even her own crew straighten with renewed courage. You are welcome to try to take what we would not accept. But I promise you this, you will pay for every inch of space in blood, and 1,000 years from now, your children's children will still be counting the cost. She cut the channel and turned to her tactical officer. Commander Park, what is the status of Project Prometheus? All stations report ready, Admiral. The defense network is fully charged and awaiting your command. Chen Wei nodded and sat back down in her chair. Then let us show these Valorians what humans can do when they have 3 years to prepare. Across the solar system, hidden weapons platforms came online. They had been built in secret, disguised as asteroids and space debris, positioned at strategic points throughout the system. Their technology was crude compared to Valorian standards, but it was effective. Missiles that tracked their targets with relentless determination. Lasers that could punch through shields by focusing their energy on a single point. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to near-light speed by electromagnetic rails. The Conquest Fleet had expected a brief and one-sided battle. What they got was a nightmare. The first wave of missiles struck the leading Valorian ships before they could raise their shields. Explosions blossomed in the darkness of space, and for the first time in millions of years, Valorian soldiers died in combat. Grand Admiral Vethkoren stared at his tactical display in disbelief as red warning lights flashed across a dozen of his vessels. How is this possible? He demanded. These are supposed to be primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Sir, his tactical officer replied, his crystalline voice trembling. They are using weapons we have never seen before. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and large projectiles, but these missiles split into hundreds of smaller warheads at the last moment. We cannot track them all, then advance and destroy their platforms. The Grand Admiral commanded. We still outnumber them 20 to 1. This changes nothing. The fleet surged forward, and the battle truly began. Human ships darted through the chaos, smaller and more maneuverable than their Valorian counterparts. They struck at the enemy's flanks and rear, exploiting gaps in their formation, hitting weak points that their computers had identified during 3 years of observation. The Valorians responded with overwhelming firepower, their massive weapons turning human ships into clouds of debris. But for every human vessel destroyed, another took its place. And every destroyed human ship had taken at least one Valorian with it on the bridge of the Defiance. Admiral Chen Wei coordinated the battle with cold precision, moving her ships like pieces on a chessboard, trading lives for time and space. Admiral Captain Stone reported, his face pale with stress. "We have lost the Valor, the Horizon, and the Constellation. The Independence is heavily damaged and requesting permission to withdraw." "Denied," Chen Wei replied. "Tell Captain Morrison to continue fighting as long as she can. Every minute we delay them is another minute for Earth to prepare." Hours passed, and the losses mounted on both sides. But the Valorians, who had expected a quick victory, found themselves bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Their ships were faster and stronger, but they were also complacent. Their crews had never faced real enemies, only simulations that they always won. When human fighters appeared from unexpected angles, they reacted slowly. When human missiles found gaps in their shields, they panicked. When human ships rammed into their larger vessels in suicide attacks, they froze in shock. The Grand Admiral watched his beautiful fleet being torn apart by these primitive creatures. And for the first time in his long life, he felt doubt creeping into his heart. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "we have lost 112 vessels. Human losses are estimated at 41. If this rate continues, we will win, but our losses will be far greater than projected." Bethkarn stared at the tactical display, watching the red dots that represented his dying ships multiply across the screen. "How?" he whispered. "How are they doing this?" Back on Earth, billions of humans watched the battle unfold on their screens, their hearts pounding with fear and hope. They saw their ships explode, their soldiers die, their defenses crumble. But they also saw something else. They saw their people fighting, refusing to surrender, refusing to accept the inevitable. They saw themselves as they truly were, small and fragile and mortal, but also brave and stubborn and utterly unwilling to go gently into the night and across the galaxy. Other species watched too. The Kethmari and the Voss and the Singing Minds, and 1,000 other civilizations that had accepted the Empire's gifts without question. They watched the tiny human fleet standing against the greatest military force in existence. And they felt something stirring in hearts. They had forgotten they possessed hope, because if the humans could fight, then perhaps they could too. Perhaps the Empire was not as invincible as it seemed. Perhaps saying no was possible after all. The Emperor watched the battle through a quantum link that connected him directly to the Grand Admiral's flagship. He saw everything, felt everything, understood everything that was happening in that distant star system for the first time in 4 million years. The Valorian Empire was bleeding, 100 ships lost. Then 200. Then 300. The number kept climbing as the hours passed, and with each lost vessel, the Emperor felt something crack inside his ancient heart. These humans were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to surrender at the sight of the conquest fleet, to fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Instead, they were fighting with a ferocity that defied all reason, sacrificing themselves by the thousands to delay an enemy they could not defeat. The Emperor turned to his advisors, who stood in terrified silence around the throne of light. "Explain this to me," he commanded. "Explain how a species that has only been in space for a century is destroying ships that took us millennia to perfect." Old Counselor Vethrin stepped forward. The same advisor who had warned the Emperor years ago about the danger of the humans. "Eternal One, if I may speak freely?" The Emperor nodded curtly. "The humans are not winning because their technology is superior. They are winning because their will is stronger. Our soldiers train in simulations where they always triumph. Their soldiers have spent their entire history fighting wars against each other, losing battles, suffering defeats, and rising again." He gestured to the screen. "Where human ships continued their desperate dance of death, we have forgotten what it means to truly fight, Eternal One. We have become so accustomed to victory that we have lost the instinct for survival. But the humans have never known anything else. Struggle is in their blood. Hardship is in their bones. And they will not stop fighting until every last one of them is dead." The Emperor watched as a small human fighter dove directly into the engine core of a Valorian battleship, destroying itself and its enemy in a ball of nuclear fire. "They throw away their lives like they mean nothing," he said. "No, Eternal One," Bethrin replied. "They throw away their lives like they mean everything. There is a difference. A Valorian soldier would never sacrifice himself because he believes he will live forever. A human soldier sacrifices herself because she believes her sacrifice will matter to those she leaves behind in his prison cell on the homeworld." The disgraced Ambassador Kethvora watched the same battle on a small screen that his guards had smuggled to him. Tears of crystal ran down his face as he watched the humans die, ship after ship exploding in the darkness. "You beautiful, stubborn creatures," he whispered. "You were right all along. Back in the Sol system?" The battle had reached its final phase. Only 12 human ships remained operational, gathered in a defensive formation around Earth, their weapons nearly depleted. Their crews exhausted beyond measure. Admiral Chen Wei sat in her command chair, blood dripping from a wound on her forehead, watching the remaining Valorian fleet approach. There were still over 600 enemy ships, more than enough to finish the job. "Admiral," Captain Stone said quietly, "the enemy is hailing us. Grand Admiral Vethkorans is requesting to speak with you." Chen Wei straightened in her chair and wiped the blood from her face. "Put him through." The crystalline face of the Valorian commander appeared on the screen, but it was not the confident expression that had demanded their surrender hours ago. Instead, Vethkarn looked shaken, his usual glow dimmed by shock and something that might have been respect. "Admiral Chen Wei," he said, "you have fought well. No species has ever inflicted such losses on a Valorian fleet. You have my admiration, but not your retreat," she replied flatly. "No," he admitted. "I have my orders. Your planet will be conquered. Your people will be forced to join the Empire, and this resistance will end." Chen Wei leaned forward. "Then why are we talking, Grand Admiral?" A long moment of silence passed between them. Two warriors from different worlds, different species, different universes of thought and feeling, connected only by the violence they had shared. "I am offering you a chance to save what remains of your fleet," Vethkarn finally said. "Surrender now, and I will spare your surviving crews. They will not be harmed. I give you my word." The Admiral looked around her bridge at her wounded, exhausted crew, at Captain Stone, who had fought beside her for 3 years, at the young ensigns who had been students just months ago, at the grizzled veterans who had volunteered knowing they would probably die then. She looked back at the Valorian Admiral. "Do you know what makes us different from you, Grand Admiral?" He tilted his crystalline head. "Enlighten me. You offered us immortality, and we said no because we understand that death gives life meaning. You offered us peace, and we said no because we understand that peace without freedom is just a comfortable prison. And now you offer us survival, and I must say no again." She stood up from her chair, because survival without honor is not survival at all. It is just a slower way of dying. Grand Admiral Vethkorn stared at her for a long moment, and in his ancient eyes, something shifted. "You would all die rather than surrender. Every last one of us. on the Valorian homeworld. The Emperor heard these words through his quantum link, and they struck him like physical blows. He had lived for 4 million years. He had watched stars born and die. He had ruled an empire that spanned the galaxy. But never, in all that time, had he encountered a species like this, a species that would choose death over submission, a species that valued freedom more than life itself, a species that had looked upon all the gifts of the universe and said, with absolute conviction, we would rather earn it ourselves. And for the first time since he had taken the throne of light, the Emperor felt something he had not experienced in eons: doubt. Not doubt in his power. The conquest fleet could still win this battle, could still crush these defiant humans and force them to kneel, but doubt in his purpose. What would it mean if he destroyed these people? He would prove that the Empire was still mighty, still unstoppable, still the greatest power in the galaxy, but he would also prove that the humans had been right to fear him. He would prove that the gifts of the Empire came with chains attached. He would prove that membership in his great family was not a choice, but a requirement, enforced by blood and fire, and every species that had ever joined the Empire would see it. They would see the truth behind the pretty words and generous offers. They would see that they were not partners but prisoners, and perhaps one day they would decide to fight. Tukatvar's words echoed in the Emperor's mind. You cannot silence the truth forever, Eternal One. The humans have already won, whether you destroy them or not. The Emperor closed his eyes, reaching back through millions of years of memory to a time when he had been young, when he had believed that conquest was power and destruction was strength. He had learned better since then, or so he had thought. He opened his eyes and spoke, his voice echoing across the quantum link to every ship in the conquest fleet. Withdraw. Grand Admiral Vethkoren's face showed pure shock. Eternal One, you heard me. Withdraw the fleet. Return to the homeworld. We are done here. In the Sol system, the Valorian ships began to turn, their massive engines firing as they accelerated away from Earth. On the bridges of the 12 surviving human vessels, crews stared at their screens in disbelief. They are retreating, Captain Stone whispered. Admiral, they are actually retreating. Admiral Changwei watched the enemy fleet disappear into the darkness, and slowly a smile spread across her exhausted face. On Earth, billions of humans watched the impossible victory unfold, and then they began to cheer. In cities and villages across the planet, people poured into the streets, embracing each other, weeping with joy and relief. They had done it. They had faced the greatest empire in the galaxy and refused to bow. They had paid a terrible price in blood and sacrifice, but they had remained free across the galaxy. Other species watched too, and something changed in them. Something awakened that had been sleeping for millions of years. The Kethmari began to whisper among themselves about independence. The Voss Collective started to question whether unity required submission. The singing minds of Andromeda sang new songs about courage and defiance, and in his prison cell, Ambassador Kethvora smiled as he watched humanity celebrate their impossible victory. You beautiful, stubborn creatures, he said again. You have changed everything on Earth. Admiral Chen Wei finally allowed herself to sit down, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Captain Stone brought her a cup of coffee, and she took it with hands that shook. What do you think happens now, Admiral? He asked. She looked out at the stars, so vast and full of possibility, and took a long sip of her coffee. Now, Captain, we rebuild. We grow stronger, and we wait for the galaxy to catch up with us. She smiled, because we have just shown the universe that empires can be refused, that giants can be made to bleed, and that the smallest voice can change everything if it is brave enough to say the one word that matters most. No, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, That word echoed across the galaxy, inspiring hope in hearts that had forgotten what hope felt like, awakening courage in souls that had been sleeping for far too long. The Valorian Empire had offered humanity everything. Humanity had chosen itself instead, and the galaxy would never be the same again.